So, warmly welcome for again the day 7 for element 8 general workplace issues. And now we have another important topic, working in confined spaces. And since the title itself is giving us a lot of insight, since we all are experienced, like confined spaces means a place which is not designed for human occupancy, right? Like we can't cook there, we can't smoke, we can't eat, we can live there. So that means it's a purpose built space and have limited exit re-entry, and of course, most importantly, can occupied with several toxic gases. So an abnormal kind of condition where we have to take a lot of proactive measures before even we think to work in a confined space. That is why a lot of safety requirements are in place in shape of PTW, permit to work system. And without permit, even we can't get enter. And the entry is mean any part of the body even. If you are going to enter, so you need work permit and plenty of other requirements to be fulfilled. And working in a confined spaces has become more challenging as per the nature of our processes or kind of projects, like especially the hard work, like we are doing cutting, welding, grinding, or kind of abrasive blasting, or even several kind of coatings inside or painting, spray painting. So in all such scenarios, and confined spaces means several examples we can have within our industry, especially in oil and gas, like all our manholes, even the pipelines, excavated areas, GOSP plants like gas oil separation plant, even our oil rig site, wherever we playing with nature, the nature have right to fight back or to punch back if we are not taking some preventive measures. That is why this topic must be considered very much important, and we have to understand. And to, sometimes I say in high hazardous industries, probably we don't need so many safety officers or managers if we don't have confined spaces or kind of restricted places, because mostly the issues are coming in the confined space. And the problem with the confined space working is our employees, they can't get second chance. That is why NEBOSH is also talking about several methods and kind of knowledge they are going to share with us. Like they mentioned, any place including any chamber, tank, vats, silo pit, trench, pipe, sewer, or flue or well or other similar space in which by virtue of its enclosed nature there arises a reasonably foreseeable specified risk. Like look at the picture, the manhole is there, and ultimately the foreseeable specific risk, probably the fire or explosion, the loss of consciousness for gas from gas fumes or vapor, lack of oxygen. That is why we have to follow specified kind of regulations related to oxygen, carbon monoxide, even permissible exposure limit for H2S, even some other toxic gases, and especially the LEL. Like your company mostly considering LEL more important because you believe it's a combination of all the other toxic elements. So better to measure and give more importance to LEL and UEL, lower explosive limit and upper explosive limit, in line with oxygen also. So drowning, efficient entrapment in free flowing solid, or loss of consciousness from increased body temperature. That means not only the body temperature, even overheat or kind of humidity is another risk within the confined space. Now, what factors we have to assess, the general condition, first of all, and then hazards arising from the work and hazards from outside the space. So it's not like only inside, even outside the space, we also have to assess some of the hazards. So let's discuss general condition of the confined space, the previous contents, residues, contamination, oxygen deficiency, and oxygen enrichment. Like oxygen deficiency means below 19.5% as per ocean, as per Saudi Aramco below 20%, and oxygen enrichment 23 point above than 23.5%, and same like as per OSHA as well. And hazards arising from the work is kind of cleaning chemicals or sources of ignition. Increased temperature must also be considered seriously while we are assessing several factors. Hazards from outside the space mean ingress of substances or emergency rescue. And yes, if we really want to keep ourselves safe and to our employees, there must be a safe system of work for entry. And what we have to follow, do not work inside a confined space if possible. That should be our first. That means avoidance. Do not work inside a confined space if possible. Carry out a risk assessment. And I told you the element number 5 up to number 11, we are just trying to understand different kinds of hazards, or even risk assessment, some of the risk, and most importantly, how we're going to control them and what kind of precautions in shape of administrative controls we have to implement. And of course, we are also talking about PPs against all hazards. So we are playing within this triangle, hazards and risk. And one side we also have hierarchy of control, and most importantly in the hierarchy of control we also have precautions in shape of administrative controls. Now carry out a risk assessment. This is a second step, and develop safe system of work, kind of SOPs, standard operating procedure for any process, or it could be for any activity also. Develop emergency arrangements or use permit to work, use only trained, competent personnel. So the safe system of work for entry have 6 important elements here. Now, few more things for safe system of work for entry. We need effective supervision or kind of protective supervision or close supervision. Competency, the highly competent, the more better competent people you have, less would be the chances of incident or accidents. Communication would be face-to-face, could be rope system, maybe radio, and atmospheric testing, monitoring, that means the gas testing. Now here, at this point, I really want to generate a question. When should we do gas testing? Should we do gas testing before issuing the permit? Of course, yes. Shall we do gas testing before first entry? Yes. When we are coming out and going back again, that means after breaks, shall we again do gas testing? Yes. And whenever the condition change, or or as per the nature of your project, might be you require continuous gas testing. Otherwise, if you are working especially with Saudi Aramco, after every 2 hours, surely you have to come out, and if you are going re-enter, that means you have to conduct gas testing again. So as per the nature of your project, it requires continuous gas monitoring as well, and sometimes attached with several types of alarms, so people can be familiar and can get a warning kind of indication. So immediately they can go to the muster point or come out from the confined space especially. Yes, ventilation, even yesterday we discussed in detail removal of residues. And removal of residual energy is one of the, I would say, the complicated challenge, because sometimes we call it residual energy means the remained energy. Might be you're going to say 99% the liquid or the gases are removed, only 1% left. And you are saying it's impossible for us even to remove that 1%, and you are going to accommodate. It's a horrible, terrible risk, because in the confined space, the smallest factor can destroy, and the biggest hazard is not only fire, the biggest hazard is explosion, in the confined spaces. Now, isolation, lock off of infields and outfields is another challenge, and for confined spaces, only disconnection and blinding. I repeat again, only disconnection and blinding. 2 methods are acceptable for confined space isolation. The rest of the methods, like single block, valve and bleed, double block and bleed, all are not acceptable for confined space isolation. Yes, for mechanical, for electrical, we rely on lockout, tagout, and hold tag. So in isolation, lock off of electrical mechanical hazards, PPs, we required excess egress, fire prevention must be considered important here, lighting, suitability of individuals, emergency rescue procedures. So these are further elements of safe system of work for entry only. Now, let's create a project here. You have a welding project in a confined space. That means it's a hot work. And you got this project from Saudi Aramco. And they mention you are responsible for isolation. You are responsible for entry, for doing hot work, and even you are responsible for ventilation also. And most importantly, if any scaffolding or kind of things required, that would also be your responsibility. That means the 360-degree requirements of the project, you are responsible to fulfill. Now my question is, from where are we gonna start, What would be our first step, then second step, then third step to execute this project without any injuries, without any incident or accident, and without any property damage as well? I repeat again, it's a welding project in a confined space. And the 360-degree everything we as a company have to complete. Saudi Aramco as a customer, they don't want to rely on their shoulders. What they're saying, only Mr. Contractor, we will pay you more, but you are responsible to do everything safely. Yes, as a customer, we have right to supervise, to monitor, to have some random or surprise audits, but the rest of the things you are responsible to conduct. The question is what kind of steps you're gonna follow. Appreciate if you can unmute your mics and speak up, what steps you're gonna follow. I hope you got the point. It's a welding project in a confined space. And everything you have to do as a contractor, not the customer. Customer will be only monitoring or kind of surprised or undeclared audits gonna be there, or project inspection like PID is there, project inspection team or division of Saudi Aramco. They will just come, and even might be QID also, quality inspection division. So they will just come to double check that you are on the right track, and maybe LPD can also involve, loss prevention division of Saudi Aramco. Question is how you will execute this project and what steps you're gonna follow. Yes, please. Yes, guys, or you can reply in the chat box also. Let me open the discussion in the chat box. Welding project in a confined space. Mention these steps in sequence. Sequence is important to execute this project. Yes, please. Take your time, guys, but I need your comprehensive reply on it. Welding project in a confined space. You just need to mention the steps in sequence, by the way, to execute this project without any incident or accident, near miss. Like Mr. Muhammad Al Gamdi mentioned, make sure there isn't any equipment blocking the exit, testing the air for toxic gases before entering the workspaces, removing all hazardous materials, keeping vent open, and making sure walls are tight and leak free as per OSHA. Okay. Any other steps, please? Any other opinion, please? So guys, it will all start from the work permit system. And within the work permit system, like Mr. Muhammad Al Ghamdi mentioned several things, so all would be covered while following the safest work permit system to complete any sort of project, either hot work or cold work. And yes, there must be specific SOPs for isolation, for even within the isolation might be a separate guideline or procedure for electrical isolation, for mechanical isolation, for, this disconnection and blinding, maybe separate SOP is going to be there. And then for ventilation, again, another hot work. And most importantly, in the hot work, the LEL must be 0% all the time. And to ensure that one, this confined space must be free from any kind of toxic fumes. So that's why the gas testing is so much critically important. And double check the oxygen level, the LEL, the H2S, or other toxic gases, including carbon monoxide. And most importantly, how are you gonna go with purging process or water washer steaming to make sure this confined space is free from any kind of toxic fumes? And how you're gonna select the team, the welding team or the safety team for this particular project? Who will be your standby man, your fire watcher, your CSE supervisor? And what should be the competence level of your welders itself? And most importantly, how they're going to go enter, what kind of equipment they'll be using, and most importantly, another element, what kind of PPs, either FRC, fire resistant clothing, or some special PPs. And how are they going to make sure the proper housekeeping during the project? That means you chop up the elephant in three domains, like before, during, and after. So whatever safety precautions, for each stage, make sure you are following in. Because you remember I mentioned in the confined space, we don't get mostly the second chance. That is why prevention is better than cure. So we have to be proactive, before even we start our project. That is why, like let's take an example of Saudi Aramco. They will ask us, where is your HIP, hazard identification plan, then ERP, emergency response plan, then they'll not issue the permit until you do joint site inspection, giving them GSA and plenty of other documentation, and filling this permit form, hot work permit or confined space entry permit, or EULB, like equipment opening line break permit. And if you're doing some cold work, maybe this cold work permit as well. So all four permits, they will not sign until you do gas testing, until you make sure you have the right person for the right job, until you make sure the right set of PPs are there, the isolation or the lockout tag is done, well done, all as per their procedure or as per their GIs, general instructions of Saudi Aramco. Then they're still going to be involved before first entry. How are you going to conduct your toolbox meeting? How you'll make sure the people are going inside safely? How the standby man will be, make sure that all the entries are there, that everyone who is going inside is writing his name, ID, time in, time out, and why he's going inside. And several gas testing requirements, as per the nature of the project. And once the job is done, during the welding, everything is safe, fire watcher is used, fire blanket is there, or the area is wetted. And most importantly, once the job is done, everything is back into the normal mood and all the clearance is done, housekeeping is redone, and make sure none of the equipment or material is left behind. Even the head count is there, that no one is still in the confined space. And then we remove isolations, we remove locks, and tags, and all, the space is back to the operation mode. We are giving back to our customer. So in sequence, several steps we're going to follow, right? And why we need isolation and lockout tagger? Because several kind of energies are attaching or connected to this confined space. Might be mechanical energy, electrical, hydraulic, pneumatic, maybe some toxic materials or some gases are also coming. So how are you going to make sure? That is why disconnection and blending are two acceptable methods for isolation for confined space. I hope it would have given you some detailed idea how things have to move on. Otherwise, if you don't want to remember all the sequence, then follow your SOPs. Follow your SOP, all sequences there, but make sure this SOP is in line with international standards or in line with your Saudi Aramco GI's, general instructions actually. Now we have 8.4 is all about lone working. That means the risk assessment factors for lone working workers who are separated from their work colleagues, lack assistance if things go wrong, communication with the colleagues more difficult, out of eyesight, out of earshot. Especially in Saudi Arabia, we have a lot of remote areas and several people, it's hard to find them in the desert. They just lost. But still, even Saudi Aramco, especially, mashallah, have state-of-the-art technology. Still, they will find out. But sometimes it's truly hard even for them. That is why, several fatalities are reported. The person is no more in the desert because he lost. He couldn't find the way. And several vehicles, they are tipping over or toppling over because of poor desert driving skills. And sometimes your work environment, you are working, you're a lone worker actually. Now, safe system for working for lone work, no lone working for high risk activities. Number one, there must be zero tolerance policy that you can't work alone, especially for high risk activities, especially in confined spaces. You require remote supervision. You need logging workers' locations, mobile phones or radios, lone worker alarm systems and procedures for lone workers, and emergency procedures training for workers. So we will definitely have a safe system of work for lone working. Now 8.5 is all about slips and trips. And I told you the slip, slips and fall still, is the more terrible causes of fatalities globally. Now we have one group exercise. What is the difference between a slip hazard and a trip hazard? Give examples of each. I'm opening this question in the chat box. The difference between slip hazard and trip hazard. Yes, please. Waiting for your response, and you can give some examples also. Difference between slip and trip hazard. Yes, Mr. Muhammad Al Ghamdi, slip means someone slip from because of wet floor, because of any slippery surface, or might be some spilled items are there, but trip is basically kind of an obstacle of some kind of causing you to stumble. Totally agree. So these are some common slipping and tripping hazards like smooth floor surfaces, inherently slippery, wet, contamination, frost and ice. And if our janitors or cleaning staff, if they are washing the floor or mopping the floor and they are not barricading the area, especially at least highlighting through red tape or putting some board on the surface for our straightforward communication. Now, common slipping and tripping hazard, trip hazard, uneven or loose floor surfaces, trailing cables and objects on the floor. These are the trip hazards. How are we gonna control, the slips and trip hazards? So management principles: eliminate the hazard first of all, create a safe place, create a safe person. On risk assessment must be done, normal patterns of movement, predictable abnormal movements or accident history or adverse weather condition, maintenance requirements. Spill resistant surfaces, these will depend on the number of people, footwear, wear and tear, spills and contamination, environmental conditions. So if your safety shoes of your employees are not anti-slippery, so the probability of slip trip fall will be definitely more higher. Spillage control and drainage system must be there, like maintenance and inspection, containment of foreseeable spills and leaks. That means the bunds of containers must be there rather than spilling. Spilling is going to be everywhere. So behaviors controls is also critical. In one of the company, we signed a contract again, because personally as a consultant, I'm more like publishing to go for IMS, integrated management system. So that company also agreed, and there was a poor behavior of some of the machine operators. They need some kind of rimming oil, we call it, using that rimming oil when they are manufacturing paper cups. And these paper cups, you can't form the rim without rimming oil. So whenever they get that rimming oil in paper cups, sometime in, kind of bottles or buckets. So while transporting that oil from the drum until to their machine, during this distance, several spillage, like maybe few drops and some spillage near to the machine, and then while they are using that rimming oil in the machine, even some spillage nearby to the machine, and while machine is running, even some fumes were going in the air and re-accumulated at the machine, and machine have some accumulative dust, which is creating some terrible defaults, and later on, especially to the PRC system, like the complete control system of each machine, because of this dust accumulation along with the rimming oil, and several smoke factors from the machine are also coming out, and they all are meeting together, and some fire incident, and they are using, time and again for fire extinguisher and that powder. So a lot of accumulative factors are hitting to the machine and creating several issues. But the problem was with the behaviors. And then we took a lot of initiatives, how to teach them, how they can take safely this, and then we took a strong decision that only one person is responsible to bring the oil safely and put into the machine. And later on, the daily cleaning of the machine became mandatory. Before you hand over machine to the next shift, the machine must be cleaned properly, and the oil spillage or kind of spill kits must be used. So just controlling this behavior, trust me, it was really a horrible experience, I would say, because people, every mindset is different. Sometimes it's really hard to tackle them, and the terrible behavior, the key factor is they don't think it is dangerous, or it is it's normal for them. If few drops are falling on the ground, it's quite normal. If machine is leaking, it's quite normal for them. And to be very honest, I still remember for this project, we hired, instead of male operators, we hired female operators, and mostly the Saudi females. And mashallah, they later on, because females naturally have some tendency to keep neat and clean the area, and not to let anything badly happen near to their machine. They're gonna call to the janitor, they'll keep that area neat and clean, and while they are performing any kind of cleaning, they are keeping their safety also at optimum level, and make sure no drop is falling down, and then the issue was resolved, because sometimes you have no other option except to take some bold decisions, and that's why immediately the management agreed. Yes, as per the psyche of women, we can add some female staff and see. And then from that staff, one was the female, I still remember, she got promoted as a foreman, and then she started managing the whole machine shop and manufacturing paper cups, mashallah. Even later on, the company management decided to hire the packers also, the female. I hope you got the point. So this diversity can also be tried, in a positive grounds. And of course, you need to maintain a safe working environment, especially when females are involved. You need to quarantine the area and make sure, no one is interrupting, no one is, uh, bothering them at any level, including the top management, that they are not visiting that area without any solid reason. And same way, the drainage for outdoor walkways, wet floors, showers, essential in many workplaces, like ensures that pedestrians stay within designated area and pedestrian areas are free of hazard. Like if you put yellow lines, or these are the walking areas or kind of pedestrian areas, they can only walk within that lines. So make sure they are free from any sort of hazards, designated by guardrails, curbs, or pavement or marking. It's up to you. Now, use of signs and personal protective equipment. Use of signs, prohibition, warning, mandatory, PP in the form of safety footwear with appropriate tread pattern and grip characteristics. Information, instruction, training, and supervision. Yes, surely you have to provide proper informations, proper instructions, training, and supervision as per the hazards and what is required of them and how they can apply it. Implementation is everything. Like you have bonanza of information and knowledge everywhere, but no benefit until you apply, until you implement. Like you have plenty of SOPs and safety policies, safety regulations, work instructions, safety signs are there, and even some kind of work, safety precautions, a list of administrative controls you're going to implement process wise. But what if no one is following or implementation is very poor? That means no change will be there in the company. Just some instructions are displayed and you can show someone, look, the system is in place, but in fact it is not being followed. And supervision is essential. Ensure correct behavior, ensures correct behavior. So it depends on the supervisor also. If he is a good leader, definitely he must be the mind changer, the convincing power and the positive behavior and the kind of passionate energy, he can convince people to follow safety rules and keep their behavior in the safer zone, not to do anything silly. Now, housekeeping and maintenance of safe workplaces. All floors and walkways must be cleaned. Spill procedure must be implemented. Housekeeping standards need to be allocated. Even area-wise, which area is going to be cleaned at what time, and how are they going to be cleaned? All standards must be well clear, understood by the janitorial staff. And floors, walkways, guardrails, and fencing access and egress inspected and repaired also. And make sure you have emergency exits kept clear, like emergency exits kept clear. Now lighting checked and maintained. We have another one like safe movement of people and vehicles in the workplace, because internal transportation of people are moving here and there and bringing things, or visiting to the dining areas or for tea breaks and going to the toilet. So all are required safe movement. And especially if you have forklift or different trolleys within your manufacturing area or kind of warehouse, or within your at your project site. So make sure there is a safe movement. Like typical risks relating to vehicle movement, sometimes loss of control due to driver error, environmental or mechanical reasons, overturning like laterally or longitudinally, the longitudinally, collisions with other vehicles, pedestrians or fixed objects. Now, what could cause a forklift truck to overturn? I'm opening this question in the chat box. What could cause a forklift truck to overturn? Awaiting your answer, please. Little more energy before we wrap up the day. And I'm requesting for that because I need your some involvement. So, okay. Unbalanced load. Mostly, it's sometimes the forklift driver, because of overconfidence, they think, and because of the small distance might be, he will normally not consider that the load have to be balanced all the way. And sometimes they'll not wrap up, or maybe no wrapping or no tie off, just moving around because of their overconfidence, because of reluctant to do some wrapping or some kind of tightness, for that load, and also miscalculation. And uneven surfaces, and what surfaces, also another reason. Excellent, Marshall. Now, these are some of the factors mentioned by NEBOSH, cornering while being driven too fast, uneven loading of the folks, driving over potholes, or even driving with the load elevated, especially concerning cornering or uneven tire pressure. That means again, no poor balance, driving across a slope, excessive braking and collision, especially with curves. So these are some of the factors mentioned by NEBOSH. Now, few other risk factors: driving too fast, inadequate lighting, reversing without the help of banksman, blind spots such as corners and entrance, and bad weather conditions, obstructed visibility, that means overloaded forklift truck, poor design of pedestrian walkways and crossing points, and lack of vehicle maintenance, silent operation of machinery. Now, non-movement related hazards, probably the loading, manual and mechanical, overloading, exceeding the safe working load of the vehicle is designed for 1 ton and you are trying for 1.2 ton, unloading, tipping operations, or securing to sheet a lorry, or even coupling, attaching trailers, or maintenance work like working at height. Now, workplace transport control measures, how we gonna do is, again, hierarchy of control, the starting from eliminate the hazard, create a safe place, create a safe person. Risk assessment, yes, you can identify all the hazards, identify the groups at risk, like who might be harmed and how, evaluate the risk, record and implement a review. So hierarchy of control would be almost similar, but yes, according to the nature of hazard or risk, the control measures should be accordingly. But overall, the hierarchy sequence is same. Now, the risk assessment, we have to do measures necessary to control risk created by vehicle operations can be grouped under like workplace environment, one factor, one domain of risk assessment. Second, the vehicle itself. Third, we can see the driver's behavior, like WVD, so we can complete the risk assessment. Now, let's talk about one by one. The workplace environment is all about vehicle-free zones, pedestrian-free zones, traffic route layout must be well defined, segregation, marked walkways and crossings, separate access points, speed limits must also be published and visible to the forklift operators, The required vehicle movements to be managed and good visibility, signage, well-lit maintained road pathways, avoid, gradients or barriers at the changes in levels, loading docks. I'm sure you are following all these things and mashallah well implemented, especially in your warehouse or even at your project site, Now, what controls could reduce the risk in areas where vehicles are reversing? Like, take an example of your parking area. Mostly, we have reversing while we park, and later on now we want to go back to home. So everybody is reversing. So in that scenario, what controls could reduce the risk in areas where vehicles are reversing? So take an example of parking area. So I'm opening this question in the chat box. What controls could reduce the risk in areas where vehicles are reversing? Take your time, please, and I'm looking for your response. What controls could reduce the risk in areas where vehicles are reversing? We'll take an example of parking area. Mr. Muhammad Al-Ghamdi, you mentioned good vehicle selection so that drivers have adequate visibility, prevent of audible reversing alarms and flashing beacons. Okay. So let's see how NEBOSH is suggesting us site route for safe vehicle parking of a forklift truck, especially for the forklift. They're giving some, like apply the handbrake, lower the forks and tip the mast forwards, remove the key, do not obstruct a traffic route and do not obstruct a pedestrian route. So do not obstruct emergency escape routes. So that means in parking area, reversing rules would be a little bit different than the forklift, right? Because, and also driving a car and driving a forklift, entirely two different skill sets, So whenever we are reversing the forklift truck, make sure we apply the handbrake, lower the forks and tip the mast forward and remove the key. Do not obstruct a traffic route. Do not obstruct a pedestrian route and do not obstruct emergency escape route. So we can park safely the forklift truck. How we gonna measure to reduce risk of accident from reversing vehicles? That was our question. Avoid reversing by using one-way system. Avoid reversing by using one-way systems. That means segregate pedestrian vehicles, good visibility from the vehicles, like Mr. Muhammad Al-Ghamdi mentioned, reversing alarms and beacons. That's another. Mirrors to reduce blind spots. High visibility clothing, good lighting, and also banksman training for drivers and pedestrians. So these are some of the control measures to reduce the risk of accidents from reversing vehicles. Now, safe vehicles, that means suitable for their intended use, suitable for the environment and conditions of use, maintained in safe working order. That means the safe vehicles must be, can only be claimed if they are maintained well, they are suitable one, and they are being used as per the environment condition and intended use, And most importantly, driven by the trained qualified staff and inspected routinely before use, but not tick that everything is 100% okay every day. The inspection means must be effective inspection, Now, safe vehicles, that means the seat for the driver, seat belt, roll bar or roll cage, and guard to protect the driver in the event of falling objects, horn, mirror, and the cameras to aid begin a notable reversing alarm and beacon or flashing light. We can consider these are the factors to ensure safe vehicles. How the safe driver should be look like? Competent to drive the vehicle, medically fit to drive. And a very important point, the medically fit to drive and provided with specific information, instruction, and training, and still have to be supervised. Now let's talk about 8.7 is all about work-related driving, because many accidents occur on the public roads while driving on bus. No specific health and safety legislation managed like any other risk. So for this reason, ISO 39001 road traffic safety management system is there. And I hope you remember, any kind of management system, the foundation is PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. And this cycle was, if you remember, we explained in element 3 against ISO 45001, and we discussed 14001 and 9001. All the management standards, the key foundational part is the PDCA cycle. Now, another question is, what factors would you need to consider when carrying out a risk assessment for a specified work-based driving task? Imagine if your drivers are bound to go every day from Dammam to Riyadh or from Dammam to Al-Hassa, how are you going to do risk assessment for this work-based driving task? So as per NEBOSH, these are the key factors you have to follow, the 5 steps. That means identify the hazards, identify who might be harmed, who may be harmed, evaluate the risk, record the finding, and review. So we have to follow these 5 steps in sequence to complete the risk assessment, like identify the hazards, identify who may be harmed, number 3 is evaluate the risk, and number 4 is record the finding, and number 5 is review. So in sequence, I mean, we have to remember that sequence, if we really want to do risk assessment in a better shape. And identify the hazard, that means the journey distance, the driving hours, work schedule, stress and weather condition. And identify who may be harmed, that means the driver and any pedestrian or maybe other vehicle drivers. So evaluate the risk means eliminate the need to travel. That should be our first priority, Travel by a safer means and with a better journey plan. If road travel, takes sensible precautions. If it's a road travel, take sensible precautions. And record the finding and review. So this is the part of risk assessment process. Now, how are we gonna evaluate the risk? If road travel is the preferred option, then look at the driver, the vehicle, and the journey. And base controls around these factors: the driver, the vehicle, the journey itself. That is why I hope within your company you might have defensive driving training. First of all, for all your drivers, you must have like defensive driving procedures or some kind of rules, regulations, and you surely be having a journey management plan or kind of a journey plan, and you must have some kind of vehicle inspection checklist which need to be completed by the driver itself. And within the journey plan, you'll consider the safest roads or the kind of routes, And for the driver, we need competency, we need training, fitness and health, like driver's license are checked, experience and ability. Training means advanced or defensive driving courses like vehicle safety. Pre-use inspection must be there. So CTF means competency, training, and fitness and health. That means medical examination, eyesight check, and most importantly, the drugs policy must be there, because distracted or despaired driving, is one of the terrible hazard and one of the terrible reason of growing accident or incidents, globally. Yes, we truly have to make sure the vehicle Suitability and condition. Suitability means the minimum requirement standards, insurance and valid regulatory certificate if private vehicles use. And I hope, mashallah, since we have a strong system in Saudi Arabia, so we all know what regulations we have to follow. Same way the condition must be maintained, and pre-use inspections and defect reporting system must also be there. That is why some companies, if they have several vehicles, so they have their internal workshop and hired some technician from outside, and they are doing maintenance internally and also reporting accordingly. Now the vehicle itself must have safety equipment like safety belt, airbag, head restraints, an emergency triangle, first aid kit, spare tire, and fire extinguisher. And yes, we required SCI, that means safety critical information like tire pressures, headlights, and restraint adjustment. Even though we are quite familiar about all these things, but in sequence, step by step, we just need to make sure our drivers, our maintenance teams, they are following all these instructions. Ergonomic, yes, adjustability of seat position and posture is so much imperative. So mobile phone use must be prohibited. We required the journey plan, as I mentioned, what we have to do, the routes avoid hazard, town centers obstruct low-risk roads like motorways, avoid roadworks. Scheduling means avoid peak times, avoid fatigue times also, like 2 to 6 a.m. or 2 to 4 p.m. Flexible deadlines. So we need journey plan for this one. Yes, time is important, distance is important, weather conditions also have to be considered. We have to be realistic for time, route, weather breaks, rest breaks, statutory requirements like lorry drivers, and distance means use other transport, not excessive. Weather conditions mean reliable weather forecast, no driving or additional safety advice in bad weather. Now, the hazards of electric and hybrid vehicles. We have silent operation, unexpected engine startup, high voltage electricity, charge retention, batteries, manual handling, and magnetic forces are there because of electric and hybrid vehicles. That means they are complicated by remote key operating systems, and the key does not need to be in the ignition for the vehicle to be operational. So for those like electric or hybrid vehicles, we have to be more careful by that. So this is all about element number 8. In this element, so far we have discussed the kind of welfare facilities, the basic welfare facilities, especially also we identified the workplace environment standards like seating, ventilation, heating, and lighting. We discuss about the effects of working in extreme temperatures and relevant controls. We also discuss about hazards related to work and height, and most importantly, the controls as well. And we also outlined at height, work at height, how it should be avoided, what engineering measures we can use to prevent falls. We also discuss how to minimize the distance and consequences of a fall. And furthermore, we also discuss hazards and precautions relevant to scaffold, mobile tower scaffolds, MEWP, and ladders. That means mobile elevating working platforms, and outline the meaning of the phase like confined space. And we discuss about the hazards, precautions and controls, and most importantly, the PTW system. And we also discussed one kind of a project like welding in a confined space. And in sequence, we shared one example of Saudi Aramco project, how the safety, kind of in sequence, what safety steps we have to follow. Now, various issues that must be important and considered. while developing safe system of work for confined space entry. And we also discuss about the lone working and several kind of requirements to make sure our people are safe while working alone. And how are we gonna assess or conduct risk assessment or eliminate or control using a safe system of work. And now, just one thing, let me mention here, because since it's all about general workplace requirements or kind of things we're going to implement, and what I personally suggest to the companies whenever we get involved from idea to production, because some companies they give us project from idea to production. That means we will support them how to get land on leasing from Saudi government. We will make sure how to conduct environmental studies through some third party other companies. We will make sure how to coordinate with engineering teams of that contractor. We're going to make sure the right set of construction of that building and incorporating safety standards. And even once the construction is done, all electrical systems, everything, ventilation is done as per international standards. We support them how to buy machines, the right safest machines. And we also support them the right set of commissioning on floor and make sure the trial run is the safest one and no chances of injuries are there, because on those machines, we're going to make sure the right set of safety sensors, right set of safety devices are in place, even areas are sensorized, so intentional or unintentional human errors are also considered, so no one can even have a suicidal attempt or killing himself while machine is running. If anyone is coming near to the machine, at a certain point machine would stop. So we will incorporate several artificial intelligence systems incorporating within that machine system. And once the job is done, we will support them even in recruitment, like how to find the best talent from the market. So it is up to our client, he want to add us from the start, from his idea, because sometimes we support them only for business planning also, because we have good experts, working as a freelancer mostly globally with us. So in this element number 8, also, if you remember, we discussed a lot of key issues for the safe system of work. That is why at adequate level, we require training, supervision, and monitoring. And trainings mean the effective trainings. We also discuss about slips and trips for pedestrians and their controls, hazards associated with like careful design and construction of workplace. We also discuss about vehicle operations, their hazards, and how we're going to control them. And most importantly, how the workplace environment should be designed, which I told you. Sometimes we get involved from idea to production. So we are part of their designing phase, we are part of their construction, and also we're going to make sure the safe vehicle movement, even buying of several machines. Now the key requirements of the vehicle for the drivers, we also relatively high risk nature of work related driving on the roads. We also discuss about risk assessment of work-related driving, especially focusing on the main areas of concern like driver, vehicle, and the journey itself. That means that defensive driving procedures must be implemented. And most importantly, how are we going to reduce the driving risk? We must have to implement a lot of controls, which we have discussed so far, and also identify the additional hazards associated with electric and hybrid vehicles. So tomorrow, inshallah, we will start element number 9, the work equipment. That means the heavy equipments, and particularly again, triangle is saying we will discuss hazards, risk assessment, precautions, controls. That means the hierarchy of control. So it's the same triangle starting from element number 5 until 11, element number 11. So all those elements are just helping us how to conduct better risk assessment of our processes, activities, areas, machines, equipment, whatever we have within our company. So I hope it is more than enough for the day. Thank you very much for your great energy, mashallah. And thank you very much for being with me until, up to now. It's almost 2 o'clock now. So see you tomorrow, inshallah, at 10 o'clock. If there is any confusion, any question, we have a WhatsApp group. You can share your concerns and maybe we can active more to this WhatsApp group and get benefits from each other. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day. I'm happy to have you all here, mashallah.